the 16 days of activism against gender-based violence is one of the advocacy areas that is key for us. It's a time when we raise awareness on SGBV issues. It's a time when we hold policymakers accountable, really looking at bringing the policy from the shelf to implementation and really looking at what have they implemented. We are doing this at the county level. Several counties now have SGBV policies where what have they implemented, and we remind them what is still to be done. Really just making sure that it's not just on paper, but it's coming into reality. Being a women and girls organization, SGBV is one of the things we come across, and the YWCAs in Kenya, which are in Mombasa, Tana River, Nairobi, Kisii, Kisumu, Siaya, and Meru are safe spaces that victims of SGBV can take refuge in. In those safe spaces, they receive counseling, and really they are sheltered from the perpetrators. And on the health side, we work with health units to just ensure that their health is also catered for, because some have faced bodily harm. So this year we started off the campaign in Meru. Why Meru? Meru is one of the high prevalence areas with regards to SGBV. So one in 3 women, both young and old, in Meru face SGBV. So we went on a campaign in Meru to start off the 16 days, and we also were monitoring their policy. Meru has had an SGBV policy for the last 4 years, so we went and we were monitoring how far have they gone and what is yet to be done. So that's what we presented to the county government, just to keep them on their toes and remind them that this is yet to be done in this high prevalence area.
I've just been here with Side by Side for I think 5 months. So I'm very new to the organization, and so I'm going to be talking about what they've done. But what's so interesting is that Side by Side, which was originally, the secretariat was in England, in Scotland, it moved to South Africa, and it's hosted by We Will Speak Out. And so the work that I did before joining Side by Side is associated with We Will Speak Out. So I will speak about Side by Side, their story, and also We Will Speak Out, and bring those stories together. If that is all right, Chair.
That is perfectly fine, ma'am.
So I'm just going to quickly run through this, in telling the story. As I said, it's just 5 years old. So it's a fairly new organization. And the story is that it's a movement more than an organization. A lot of organizations came and said, we want to come together and network and work as a group. We are working in silos. And so it was formed. I was not part of the formation, as I said. I was only here for 5 months. So it's a global movement pursuing transformational change for gender justice, people of faith and faith-based organization, united in the belief that each person is made in the image of God and has intrinsic value and dignity. So you can already see the values that are coming there. And what stands out is that it's a movement. It consists of organizations that are already doing gender work, but they come together around the table to say, what have we learned? What can we push together rather than on our own? So let me quickly go through that. It operates at local, national, international levels. They partner together. So it means that you have chapters, they call them chapters at national level, and then regional working together. Particularly, let's say there's something that the AU is doing. And what about global? They work together with the Conference on the Status of Women. So it's also just to get the story of the organization, that the components are different organizations coming together to say, we are doing this, but what can we do better together? That is the key. So it's not something starting from the beginning. It's something that's already working with organizations that are working. And they acknowledge, I think, what we all acknowledge here, that religious teachings have often endorsed social and cultural norms that perpetuate gender justice, and recognize that people of faith and our religious leaders have a responsibility to revisit sacred texts and promote faith values of love, dignity, and gender justice. You can almost echo this with your own organizations. So we're all on the same page. So let's quickly move on. That's the vision, to see people free from cultural, interpersonal systems. And then the goal is gender inequality is not acceptable. Behaviors and practices no longer condone or promote social, political, economic development are gender equitable. In other words, that you link gender justice with SDGs, because it's not enough that women feel liberated, make and political lives. So we cannot do theory in Africa when people are hungry, when people are, dispossessed. Theory and practice need to come together. So that's really what they're saying. And dealing with power relationships, to think outside of the box in terms of power, that when we're talking about feminist theories of power, those need to be completely different, where it's power with rather than power over. So all these kind of concepts become part of it. And then to eliminate gender-based violence in its totality, whether it's physical, spiritual. It's interesting that research is being done by one of the chapters of spiritual abuse. When women are not given an opportunity to be priests, that's spiritual abuse. So those kind of things. So let's move on quickly. And then the sort of like what Side by Side does is that it just gives a framework so that its members in their different contexts can decide how they're going to do that. So you give like a framework, and it's up to the members to contextualize it. So when we say we're shifting values, that's the personal levels. We want people to change, communities to have new values, gender inequality unacceptable, also at a community level as well, legal systems, because we still see, that challenge in many legal systems where women are treated as minors. And then ensure that gender justice is explicit, both religious institutions and governments, so that we see that even in the expression of faith, gender justice is integrated in what is done in churches and governments. And then to have a positionality where faith actors are not a barrier to gender justice. So basically, side by side movements of people that are already doing gender justice work within faith communities. So it's interfaith. So the members are from different faiths coming together to say, in ordinary life, you have all these different faiths next door to each other. So if they can talk the same language and say that gender justice is an expression of our faith, then women across the communities can experience that liberation. So that interfaith is very important. Is that the last? Say anything? So these activities translate the vision to develop a more focused and coordinated faith response. In other words, let faith people work together and is coordinated. And then to support national symposium and national coalitions, build awareness, capacity, commitment among faith leaders to challenge what, the damaging social norms. And I think we're all familiar with that. And support women, faith leaders in particular, and women of faith to become champions for gender justice, to really make sure. It's one thing to put women in positions, but it's another thing to support and to say, you are bringing in a whole new way of thinking. Something needs to shift when women are around the table. We simply cannot be echoing what patriarchy is saying. Something needs to change. Those systems need to change because women have come in. So we're not there to perpetuate systems that dominated, systems of domination. We're here to bring a completely different way of understanding power with rather than power over. So that needs support. We simply need, that is such an important thing. And then evidence-based to show how changes happened. So we use the outcome harvest as your monitoring and evaluation tool, where we say, how has change happened in the projects that you've done? So really it's just to have that picture of side by side as a movement consisting of different organizations, sharing a framework, sharing a very broad framework, so that in each context, people can look at it and say, here, we have a problem with faith leaders because they understand the text, and then they will do seminars for religious leaders. So now, as we are moving forward, we are saying, let's go back and reflect on what has worked, and let's talk around and see what we can carry forward. And also let's sharpen our tools. And we're going to sharpen that in order to make sure that everyone is included. Because when we're talking about women and men, we're very binary. You can think that we are talking about exactly the same people. But when you're talking the category of women, there's diversity. There are women with disabilities, there are widows, there are women different sexualities. How does our talking about people, is that inclusive? Are there people that are left out because of the way we define people, the way in which we limit? We say, as Christians, we know we're only going to look at women, whatever that means in our heads. But does that include all types of women in the community? Or are they women that we too discriminate against? And so we need to be sharpening our tools, because we know we haven't even spoken about LGBTIQ people as if they don't exist, people with disabilities, all kinds of things. So we want to sharpen our tools so that we can be inclusive. In the SDG, the United Nations and all the members agreed that we want inclusive justice. And so we need to be sharpening our tools so that happens. We need to be intersectional, so that we know that the oppression that a Black, poor woman with disability, with a different sexual orientation, that she faces multiple forms of oppression. So we want to sharpen our tools as we go forward, so that we want to be inclusive. We want a paradigm shift. There is no ways that we can continue with patriarchal ways of thinking. So as feminists, when we enter into this field of liberation, we need to frame it in such a way that it's inclusive of all women, inclusive of all men. Not all men are perpetrators of violence. There are many that are good fathers. How do we draw them to be allies with us? And how do we respond to those that do perpetrate violence? And those systems of violence that are there in our churches that have been sustained for centuries, how do we dismantle those? And what do we replace those with? What do we replace those with? And that's really what we want to do in the second 5 years, is to really get critical in our thinking, very focused, and producing alternatives, so that when we come on the table, we can say, this is how power is practiced, that is non-patriarchal. This is how a liturgy, this is how worship, this is how the church structure that is non-patriarchal looks like. This is how a woman who is liberated functions with agency. That clarity. This is a time for clarity. What is it exactly that we want? What are we fighting for? When we say we want women to be liberated, for what? And what does that look like? And this is what we want to be doing in the next 5 years, to conceptualize to deconstruct and to be creative in making things actually happen, happen differently. And that is, and we don't even know what that looks like. So it's going to be working through, it's going to be reflection. So that's the kind of 5 years in order to build that makes gender equality normal, something that makes non-dominating ways of relating normal. We want to normalize something that hasn't even been created. Thank you.
Allow me to speak first before I start on that. You can see that triangle and what's going around it. That's the world, that's our world logo and applies to our African YWCAs. We are a movement. The YWCA, World YWCA, as it is called, is headquartered in Geneva, and we do have YWCAs in Europe, in Africa, in South America, in North America, and everywhere in the world. So I want to start by saying we are already a movement before the work that we do, and that's why we are moving round that triangle. We work with everybody, all inclusive, irrespective of who you are, young women, and we even embrace men. So having moved from the world, we come down to the YWCA of Kenya. So who are movement in Kenya? The YWCA works to empower young women and girls to actualize their potential and live fulfilled life. So you can see it is quite embracive. It is, so long as it has to do with young women and girls. So we address different issues by changing attitudes and beliefs, and at the same time we build a strong movement of young women leaders who undergo training in leadership, advocacy, peer mentorship to enable them be advocates for gender equality, climate justice, peace and conflict resolutions, SRHR, violence against women and girls. So YWCA Kenya promotes gender equality by empowering women and girls to have a voice and challenge the retrogressive cultural norms associated with this. So to achieve this, we build movements. So we work with faith leaders and we work with faith-based organizations and women rights organizations. We do not at any time implement ourselves. We work with others as part of building the movement. And later on, I'll give you an example how we are working in Kenya in our project that we are movement building to achieve our objective. So what's our experience in movement building? We are member of several networks and alliances that champion girls and women rights, both at continental and national level. And there's a story at continental and national and international level. I'll come to it. I've given examples of who we work with. So YWCA Kenya has maintained its autonomy despite working with others. So how do we do this? We maintain a strategic focus. We move from project focus to a partner focus. And this has been part of the process of moving from discrete, piecemeal interventions towards strategic, results-oriented ways of working. YWCA Kenya engages decision makers in policy advocacy and participates in policy-making processes. I'll give you examples. We have participated in COP26, whose main focus was gender and climate change, policy making at country and national levels. I'm happy to even say we were part of the process in Mozambique to get the not Maputo Protocol, you remember what was that called? In Mozambique, they were reducing the age of consent to 16. We joined them, and YWCA, not only in Kenya, but as the member associations in Africa were part of the campaign, and the age of consent is now 18 in Mozambique. So those are some of the things we do at a regional level in Africa. So we also engage faith leaders on countering violent extremism amongst the youth through interfaith dialogues. We all realize who is more affected when there is violent extremism. It's a hotbed for SGBV issues and other issues that greatly affect women, from the sons that join this kind of organizations to they themselves when these organizations come into our constituencies. So what are our struggles and frustrations? Power dynamics, the government structures. We rely on their goodwill and other commitments. This is a real struggle in trying to get our rights as women and girls. Resource expectations from policymakers, making collaboration difficult. When you approach the policymakers, they always look at you like, oh, NGO, women's rights, you're getting a lot of money. So they want to tap into it, not necessarily to push the policy forward, but yeah, really just to get your resources for their own use. That's amongst the frustrations. What we need to do, and we are doing, we identify and engage goodwill ambassadors. So these goodwill ambassadors are what we use to penetrate and penetrate into the structures that frustrate us, and they speak for us as insiders. So what are other struggles and frustrations? Competition and conflicting interests. The women rights organizations and FBOs compete for the resources available. And in that competition, sometimes it's not very nice. We miss the common road towards the common good. And then organizations also have conflicting priorities and interests, sometimes determined by even the donor, that they have to comply to their needs. So what do we need to do in this? We need to embrace the spirit of coordination and cooperation. We need to work together and cooperate and coordinate together. And how have we done this? Allow me to give you the story of the YW4A. The YW4A is, I'm sure you've heard of it since we have begun. It is supported by the Netherlands government. And how are we doing cooperation and coordination in the YW4A? We are working with other organizations. Proud to say, we are working with Faith to Action as a faith-based organization that is working with the churches and other faith-based organizations to achieve our common objective. We work with, that's because YWCA cannot penetrate that area. It's their forte, so we leave it to them. We are working with Equality Now equality now is strong in law and advocacy. We are working with KIT. We are working with KIT that is strong in monitoring and evaluation. And who else are we working with? I think those are the organizations. So those are our technical organizations that we are cooperating and coordinating with. Then, in this program, we have YWCA South Sudan, YWCA Kenya, and we have YWCA Palestine, we have YWCA Egypt, and of course, the worldwide as our big umbrella that covers all of us. I hope in giving you the story of the YW4A, you have seen how we have moved from competition to coordination and cooperation for the common good of women and girls. And we have several stories that we could give that have borne fruit. That is support from the county government of Meru in the YW4A project. We have other stories. We have moved from a program we have, that was the State of the African Women Campaign, where we worked with 15 member associations in Africa, and from this we moved to the YW4A, really taking it to the next level. And we have policy advocacy at the county levels. At these county levels, who's working with us? We are working with women rights organization. So we've moved it right from Geneva into the village. That's the YWCA story of movement building and moving from competition to coordination and cooperation. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and once more, thank you for this opportunity to make a presentation on the Nigerian Women of Faith Network. As most of you already know, we are an affiliate of the African Women of Faith Network, which also has its roots in the African Council of Religious Leaders and Religions for Peace. Our membership in Nigeria is drawn from mainly organizations under the Wowican Women wing of the Christian Association of Nigeria, foremost religious. Wowican 5 blocks consisting of the Catholics, the Anglicans, etc., etc. The Nigerian Women of Faith Network works to advocate for favorable government policies, promote gender equity, enlighten women and youths on health, education issues, reduce poverty, and promote environmental protection. We are a recognized body at government consultative fora. We are consulted on virtually every issue that affects women of faith in our country by the different strata of government. So that in itself gives us a voice as an organization representing the women of faith in the country. For instance, we are in the process of revising the Gender and Equal Opportunities Bill, which is to be presented, to be resubmitted to the Senate for passage into law. My Wowican sister and I are on that committee that are reviewing that bill. And the opportunity, it presents an opportunity for us to gauge the contents of the bill against our religious teachings. Does any aspect of it go against what our religions preach? What do we want to do for the future? Given our context of insecurity, almost nationwide, where school children are abducted in large numbers, communities are attacked, women are taken to the bush, abused, sexually abused, and sometimes they are killed. Our focus for the next few years will be, one, to bring back children to school. And that will involve a lot of advocacy, sensitization, and working with our community strategic partners to ensure that to win back their confidence and return children to school. Two will be to take a proactive action and engage with government at different levels and the security apparatus on stemming the tide of sexual and gender-based violence. So what are the things that we have done, particularly from last year? We discovered that for our own members to be able to deliver on results, we must build their capacity. So 10 Form 1 and WO Weekend leaders were capacitated with knowledge on interfaith dialogue and peaceful coexistence from the Cardinal Onaiyekan Foundation for Peace, COFP. This has greatly enhanced the capacity of our members to engage in interfaith dialogues, particularly at the level of the states and communities. So as a result of this, over 1,000 faith actors in 9 states and the Federal Capital Territory were sensitized on interfaith dialogue and peaceful coexistence through individual projects. Each person who was trained had to undertake a project at the level of the state so that we ensure that what she learned is transmitted to the lower level, all in a bid to promote peace. So as a result, negative profiling has reduced, dialogue has been initiated, interfaith dialogue has been at the level of locals, and hate speech has also greatly reduced. At least Muslims and Christians who before would avoid each other can now engage in dialogue and even discuss how best to secure peace in their neighborhood, in their state. Knowing fully that a lot of our work as Women of Faith Network will involve engagement, community engagement. 8 members from 8 of our members were trained on the concept of community-led development. And this is a paradigm shift from what we see, particularly when government seeks to work with communities. Usually we think we know it all and we can take projects to community. But data has it that 70% of donor-aided projects in Africa fail as a result of lack of sustainability arising from the non-participation or low participation of community members. So we had this training under the support of the Carter Center, and that has facilitated how we work with communities to identify their priorities. What are their development priorities? What are the community assets available to them, to support their agenda? And how best can communities sustain projects that are initiated by them? So our members are engaging with communities. I do know that one of the blocks has adopted 37 local communities that they are working with on different areas, health, wash. In fact, to mark the World Water Day, we did advocate for public-private partnership, and we were able to empower, to provide water facilities in communities across 11 states. Under this community-led development, the essence is to try to mobilize community to critically examine its norms, social norms, with a view to bringing about some changes. In the community, for instance, local communities, fathers fold their arms and feel that apart from providing for the family, they have no role in child upbringing. But through this training, community-led development, our members learned a new child care methodology, which involves the active participation of fathers in child upbringing. And we have also disseminated this amongst our members at the grassroots level. We have acquired knowledge that our knowledge on female genital mutilation has increased as a result of this community-led development training. And now we are poised to mobilize communities for action against it and other harmful traditional practices. This picture shows a visit to one of the communities in Senegal, where we interacted with the community members, including the fathers, on this concept of community-led development. We had trained over 200 of our members on human rights from the perspective of faith. Quite often we think our religious teachings are against human rights. But when we look closely at the scriptural texts, we were able to come up with verses from the Bible and the Quran that support human rights, and specifically the rights of women. During one of the trainings, we developed a novel way of teaching human rights. And you can see at the back of these two women, each of them carries one human right. The first lady,
To be free from all forms of violence.
yes, that's the human right to be free from all forms of violence. And her partner is expected to guess what human right she has at her back by miming. This second lady has the human right to clean environment. Her partner is supposed to also guess by the actions that she mimes and finally arrive at what the human right is. So this is fun in itself, and it is a methodology that we are able to replicate even with women, who are not very educated. One of the areas in which our strength as Women of Faith Network Nigeria has been displayed was in our response to COVID-19. We felt as a faith-based platform, our congregations should hear from us first and foremost, even before government says anything. You know, it's our mandate to let our congregations know what is COVID-19, what are the dangers, and how best can people prevent the spread of COVID-19. So the first thing we did was to produce radio jingles in 5 different languages, local languages, which we played on 3 regional stations that have wide reach. We also had e-posters with translations. We had messages on Facebook, WhatsApp, and Twitter for 12 weeks. At the end, we did an audience evaluation, you know, of how they have received these messages. And we are happy to report that our sponsor, the Carter Center, was happy with the results. People felt, you know, that yes, one, as a women's faith organization, we were there for them with the quick response on what interventions, you know, could be put in place. 2, we used scriptural texts, you know, to talk about health, to talk about gender and domestic violence, you know. So many people were hearing of those scriptural texts for the first time. So the Bible says, I cannot beat my wife. Or the Quran, you know, says, I must treat my wife, you know, very well. So that further endeared our organization to people. And our religious leaders are happy that we have helped, you know, to propagate these teachings from the scriptures that support, you know, positive action. We also undertook economic activities. We supported vulnerable families with palliatives, and we reached out to at least 2 million people during the lockdown when people could not go out for work. Tension was high, and domestic violence was at its highest. So we were able to give palliatives, sometimes in terms of foodstuff, provisions, money to across the 36 states and the FCT. Sometimes as individual organizations or through collaboration with other organizations. And I do know that at one instance, we collaborate with 50 other organizations to reach out with the palliatives. Next slide.
How many more slides do we have?
2, I think.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Thank you.
So we're able to empower widows in 4 states. We have gone to the second phase 2 of this empowerment, but the phase 2 is a loan. But the first tranche was just support. Through the Carter Center and the UN Women, we have been able to address the issue of poverty and the economic downturn amongst women. Through the UN Women, we reach out to over 10,000 in 10 states. WOWICAN coordinated in 5 states, Form 1 coordinated in another 5 states. We had community sensitizations on COVID protocol. We visited a village. We have a banner which reads ACRL, African Women of Faith Network, blah, 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 blah. And the community members said to us, this is the first time anybody is coming to us to talk about COVID-19. So we have to teach them how to wear the mask, what precautions to take. This was the community engagement. and who are represented by the Catholics, the Anglicans, and Muslims. What are our challenges? Inadequate resources to meet increasing demand for our work. As a result of the insecurity, we have more women and children at the internally displaced camps. We lack the resources, to meet their needs. Access to some areas is a problem, it's a challenge because of the insecurity, and then low capacity of members requiring capacity building. And we hope that we'll be able to explore more avenues of funding by collaborating with our international development partners, the private sector, and that we will also be able to do some capacity building for our members so that more members can do more work. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much. The YWCA told us that we need to shift from competition to cooperation, collaboration, and coordination. And then my sister, my mother from Nigeria or from West Africa reminded us about how our response needs to speak to the context and it needs to be relevant. She reminded us about multi-level advocacy and how we need to collaborate and advocate to change laws and to do it proactively. As we leave this space, may we take with us the power of reimagination, the power to dream. When the YWCA started with a video and we listened to the World Boss. And as she left, she encouraged us to be courageous, to be brave, and also to be creative. And so as we collaborate and strategic alliances, can we be courageous? Can we be brave? Can we be creative? Thank you. Thank you for your time.